And with that fantastic fanfare, this is the T-Force LCS Rundown, episode 28, joining you shortly after 8 p.m. tonight. My name is Machinorum. I am joined this week by Greg Credible Mushroom Russo.
Hello, everybody.
I'm Mitch Sarah Oaks.
I really hope that Kog'Maw sound from Tom can be our new just intro music.
That's really what we need. And that lovely Kog'Maw, and actually kind of creepily accurate Kog'Maw, was none other than the Optimus Tom.
I've had a lot of time to practice that Kog'Maw.
Well, as an AD carry, you should. And speaking of AD carry, we're going to be playing some League of Legends tonight. Shortly after the broadcast, for those of you listening out in the land of podcasts, you won't be able to see this. Actually, even better, you'll be able to get the instant gratification of immediately being able to go to YouTube for the Trinity Force podcast YouTube and being able to watch that game. We're playing the show tonight. We're playing the proper, T-Force proper, since Dan Sifa is not joining us tonight. He will be subbed out for Wrecker, which really worked out for us in our fantasy sports league. So
well, here's the thing. Wrecker was subbing for me in the fantasy thing, but you have me this time.
That's true. We'll have to see.
I'll still bring you guys down. Don't worry.
Well, we're gonna see. We're gonna see how all that goes down. Surprisingly, not a ton of LCS to talk about this week, but we do have a ton of news to cover. We've got exciting stuff about Worlds, and we are going to take a peer into the Challenger Series. But first, let's cross the ocean. Let's go to the land of the Orient and talk about China as it wraps up its regional tournament this week. Tell me about it, Tom. Take me. Magic carpet ride.
So, first off, well, magic carpet ride, man, that's like that would have worked way better when we were talking about Turkey if you're going to start making Aladdin references.
It's a whole new Worlds.
Oh,
also that's racist because
Declaud's going to be on this later. We don't need to start this early.
It's racist.
Yes.
So, anyway, the Chinese LPL had their regional qualifiers this past weekend, which means for everybody who was not paying attention, the Chinese LPL has it set up a little bit weird, where the winner of the spring, if they also win the summer, they automatically qualify for Worlds. In this case, Edward Gaming won spring LPL and summer LPL, which means that they automatically qualified for Worlds. And then the four teams below them, which were Starhorn Royal Club, OMG, you guys may know them, Invictus Gaming as well, and whatchamacallit, Team LGD, which is a very prevalent name in the world of Dota, but not so much in League of Legends. They actually were the four teams that were battling out in a double elimination bracket. That went on, I believe it was just the past 2 nights, so that was like Friday/Saturday and then Saturday/Sunday. They were going to be going on, and the teams that actually wound up qualifying for Worlds, spoiler alert, although you'll probably know by now already, are indeed Edward Gaming from, of course, winning both of the playoffs, Starhorn Royal Club, which features the ex-support and the ex-jungler from the KT Rolster Bullets, you may know Mr. Insec himself, and OMG actually came in as the 3rd spot. They had a bit of a shaky performance in this qualifier and almost got knocked out, actually.
I mean, that would have been a pretty big upset because LGD was... They didn't really do anything in the playoffs, and then Invictus Gaming kind of they won one game. I mean, but they really I wasn't really expecting much from them. I would have been surprised if Royal Club or OMG hadn't made it through, but that wasn't a huge surprise.
One of the things that was really surprising was the order in which they qualified. Royal Club actually faced up against OMG, and in there, everything was a best-of-3 series rather than the best-of-5 that we were accustomed to, which A, was a little bit weird to adjust to all of a sudden, and B, great because I got to watch most of the games because I was able to stay awake for most of them. But they actually, well, in the first round, I believe it was Royal Club had to play against IG, and then it was LGD had to play against... Other way around. Royal Club played LGD, and OMG had to play against IG, and OMG and Royal Club won the respective matches. IG fell to the losers bracket, where they actually lost against LGD in a 2-1 series that most people really weren't expecting to happen. Then in the Royal Club against OMG series, in the winners bracket final, Royal Club kind of shit. on OMG. Like there's no real clear way to like go about it, like to say it that way. Like you can't really say that they didn't shit on them. You could say they pooped on them, but it doesn't have the same effect. But OMG
doesn't tell the full story.
It was really, really bad. So the big strength from OMG, as you guys may remember from All-Stars at Worlds last year, they have Cool in the mid lane, who's a very powerful mid laner, potentially one of the best in China. They also have Going in the top lane, and then Lovelin, Drug, Loveling, Allen, whatever name he decides to pick for that tournament, in the jungle. And the go-to method has been Going as the team captain. He makes a lot of the shot calls, but he's also top lane bruiser kind of guy. He plays a very strong Jax. He has a decent Rise as well. One of the best Rises in China, I would venture off a guess to say. And normally, Going and Loveland, they kind of go around the map and they bash things to death. They call them the Bash Bros over there. They just kind of go about their own thing. Cool kind of wins his lane and roams around to the other side of the map and they do their thing. Their bottom lane, they still have San from Worlds last year, but instead of using Big Pomelo, they're using Coma, who's changed his name to Dada 7, not to be confused with Dodo 8 from the North American Challenger circuit. But their bottom lane is very much so their Achilles heel. And there's been a lot of internal communication issues, which were very apparent in the game against Starhorn Royal Club. Because Royal Club, first off, there's 2 Koreans and 3 Chinese guys, so they have a hard time communicating as it is, just through language barriers. Second off, they didn't really perform during the season, but they definitely stepped it up here in the playoffs and in the regional qualifier. Very specifically in one of the games, I remember a Baron Pit call where Royal Club basically forced OMG back from Baron Pit and Going and Loveland kind of went in at awkward, separate times, and they just got demolished and lost the game from that point. So OMG, where they used to be very strategically sound and have extremely dominant solo players, are being picked apart from a team like Royal Club, who has strong individual laners but no real team cohesion. And OMG kind of fell apart. And it really stuck with them in the losers bracket, too, against Team LGD. Because LGD is the opposite. They have really solid communication, but their players are not good.
So, in terms of the world stage, where do you feel that China kind of ranks in terms of, I guess, power, if you want to call that? Give it the power rankings.
Reddit thinks they're not very good, but Reddit doesn't really know anything. Reddit kind of didn't like a lot of the games that happened this week because they saw team fights upon team fights upon team fights. That first game with OMG and Royal Club had like 60 kills, which, Jesus. I mean, after we watched the LCS, yeah, exactly. That's probably the response that most people had. I think they're still really strong. I mean, they do have a #1 seed. This is not one we talked about yet with Edward Gaming. But they have 2 teams in the pool too, which is pretty big. We won't really know much about how the pools shake out until I think it's tomorrow is actually the live draw.
Monday is the World's reveal show where they're going to do the group draw and everything. Yeah.
Yeah. All right. They've already done it, I think, but they're going to just let us know what happened. Yeah. But I think they're going to be good. I think that they'll probably get, let's see, there's 8 teams going into bracket. If they don't get 2 teams through, I'd be kind of surprised. But that's just, I think we haven't seen them play against anyone since All-Stars, really. Maybe I forget if that was before or after IEM championships, but
that was after.
We really haven't seen much international play from the Chinese. So I think they'll still be solid. That's just from history. But that's how I see them shaking out in Worlds.
One of the things that really defines like the Chinese playstyle, it's the complete opposite of their other MOBA personality, which is the 85-minute Farm Fest Dota 2 games that we've seen. Those the League of Legends teams actually prefer raw, blind aggression to the extent where it becomes those situations where people are not coordinated and dive in at weird times. And
that's
one of the
60 kill games.
Something like that.
Yeah.
But their biggest flaw, which some of the teams have been working on very well, and some of them, like OMG, have been struggling with, is that they don't necessarily have the best vision control. And people may remember from All-Stars last year, when it was the MVPs of each region playing as a team of 5 against each other, the Chinese region almost lost to the North American LCS region just based off the fact that NA out-rotated them on the map. And that has always been the weakness of Chinese teams. And that is why a lot of people are still favoring the Korean teams, whether it be in the bracket stage or in the group stage, to perform a bit better than them. The biggest difference, though, is the level of play we saw in the regional qualifier from Starhorn Royal Club and OMG and then compared to what we've seen from Edward Gaming is like night and day. If Edward Gaming does not fall behind extremely early, which I believe is what happened against Starhorn Rival Club, that was the one game I actually didn't get a chance to see, so I really only just kept up through Esportspedia, just basically what the picks and bans and kind of like the game time was. But Edward Gaming is usually a very dominant Chinese team, and that is because they prey upon the weaknesses of the other teams in the region. So if Edward Gaming is able to get maybe a bit of practice in against some of the North American and the European LCS teams, some of the Korean teams, I think that they honestly have the best shot in China. And if they honestly don't make top 4 of Worlds, I would find that very surprising.
Let me ask you a really ignorant question. Do you think that the North American teams are going to have any advantage going into games against Chinese teams because of their experience with LMQ? Or to rephrase that question, how does LMQ's play style pair up to that of the current Chinese teams we're seeing going through?
My gut instinct is to say that the Chinese players are better individually for the most part, but the NA players may have a way to deal with them. I'm not... Like, this is something that I've seen be like a hot topic of debate on Reddit, and the Koreans were posting about it on Inven, and someone translated stuff, and the Koreans are like, well, no one's gonna really shit stomp the Koreans except Edward Gaming, da-da-da-da-da. And they're talking about how the Chinese teams will probably just walk over the EU and NA LCS teams. I think against NA, LMQ has morphed their play style from Chinese to North American LCS so dramatically that I'm not exactly sure the NA teams have a advantage having played against LMQ, but I think their play style of making sure they have vision, like a Cloud9 play style, definitely has distinct advantages over someone like a floundering OMG who is haphazardly going to go in at weird times and maybe overextend when they shouldn't. But there's also the fact that if that blind aggression and tower diving that hasn't existed in NA for a while catches them off guard, that'll be really difficult for the NA teams to recover. I honestly think that against an OMG or against a Starhorn Royal Club, a lot of the NALCS teams, I think it's maybe like a 60-40 in favor of the Chinese teams, unless you're Cloud9 or Alliance, because I honestly feel like those teams might have a bit more of an edge.
Well, it's definitely
I would want to point out that at the beginning of the splits, you got to remember that LMQ seemed untouchable. Their early aggression was just unable to be matched by any of the teams, and they basically rolled over NA. That was a while ago, but I think the experience of having to adapt to that, if the teams can remember that experience or remember the thought process that went into adapting to LMQ and starting to dealing them their first loss, if they can learn some lessons from that and apply them in time in Worlds, I think that may give, if not a slight advantage, perhaps some interesting opportunities that North American teams could take advantage of.
Yeah, and you've got, Cloud9 and TSM both just flat out sucked in the beginning of the split. So they're definitely going to have they've had a lot of time to work on the problems that they were having early on and fix them as we go. And of course, here we are, with TSM beating Cloud9 earlier this week. It was the game was on Monday. It was the one part of the North American Championship we didn't get to cover last episode. I figure now is as good a segue as ever. Not even Mitch can
I can't
scoff
even
at that one. So TSM did finally break the Cloud9 curse, managed to peel one game off of them and give Cloud9 their first North American LCS tournament loss in their history.
The first game loss in North American playoffs.
Right, that was the first game, or the second game in their series. And then they went on to go win 2 more and actually took the championship for themselves. Not because TSM won, but because of all of the splash effect that victory is going to have. I think this is the best thing that could have happened to the North American LCS. You have Cloud9, who's finally been presented a challenge. Here's stuff you did wrong in a tournament setting, games you lost, and reasons why you lost those games. And that's going to give them something to work on, something to motivate them going into Worlds, something they haven't had in the past. And TSM has, all of the feel-goods of, hey, we finally got ourselves, a pretty solid team. We were out here and conquered a major challenge that our team has not been able to overcome, even at its best. They've got a great motivator going into Worlds as well. So I think for the strength of the region, those two factors really are going to support the teams going in.
I think before we actually go into this, I really have to say I called it. And no one wanted to believe me, but called it.
When did you call it?
The first episode of this podcast, I said 3 things. Number 1, EU was going to have 2 top teams and the rest of the teams are going to be all mingled amongst each other. The second thing I said was TSM is the best team in North America and will take first place. And the third thing, which also almost came true, was that LMQ was a 4th or 5th place team at best, but Curse had to go and screw it all up.
And out of all of the things you could have called, Curse being Curse and being super consistent was the one thing you could have relied on from all of that. Or you could have taken, I think, what was it last? I think it was like 2 splits ago. In a post-game interview, Dyrus was saying, like, there's only one team we have to worry about in North America, and that's Cloud9. All of the other teams are non-existent, especially CLG. And he couldn't have been more right. But it felt so good to watch the TSM as a team really come together and rock out a win. Dyrus had great play. Wild Turtle was able to be Wild Turtle because no one was paying attention to him and didn't care whether or not he carried. So when the limelight is pseudo on him but not on him at the same time, boom, there he goes through and rocks it. Bjergsen had some pretty good plays. Lustboy was, I'd say, consistent at the very least. He had that one like hashtag LCS big play where he flashed in front of a Braum queue. But that was really it. I mean, I think it was just his presence and the fact that they had a really competent support on the team that made it a victory situation for them. But I was impressed. I had a ton of fun watching it. I feel bad. I was supposed to be at my fiance's parents' house for dinner Monday night, but we started watching the games at 3, and I'm like, oh, that's no problem. This will be over by the time we go. 8:30 running around like, nope, went to game 5. I'm texting her TSM. It was a great time. Really cemented in my mind that these games go on for way too long, and this is not like a hobbyable sport. You can't sit there and watch all the games. That was one series, and that was like 5 hours long. That's incredible. And it's 5 hours of actual gameplay, too. It's not commercials or any of that shit put in there.
I think the biggest thing you got to take away from that best of 5 series, too, is it was really hard to identify what Cloud9 were really bad at, and more so how between games TSM were able to like adapt. And I've really got to chalk it up to the coaching staff. I mean, Loco Doco and Reggie, you saw right after game number 1, they didn't even wait for the team to get off stage.
Right on stage.
They just ran right on stage, and they were like, this is what you guys did wrong. They sat there and talked for like all of the commercial break. Like they just had a camera on them being like, wow, look at how much these guys are discussing the game. Maybe and they come back and they win.
Maybe I read into it a little bit too much, but right in the beginning of that talk, it wasn't Reggie and Lustboy talking to the team. They were talking to each other, and it almost seemed like they were going at ends a little bit. But I don't know. It rubbed me the wrong way. It's from a spectator's perspective that you got that quick clip, so I don't know what the full discussion was like. But that put like almost a sinking feeling in my stomach. Like, oh my god, they have no idea. Like the coaches are fighting. Like all this stuff was just going on in my head, and then you saw them come in, and then boom, they were able to get through game 2, no problem. But I think Cloud9 was just playing way too defensively that whole time, thinking that, hey, we can just go around and not make a ton of mistakes, be consistent, and be able to pull out a win, which is a pretty good best-of-5 strategy. But TSM was on point. They came in there with a plan, and they executed it. Give Tristana to Wild Turtle, and then go.
Yeah, I wouldn't say they were on point. Those games were a lot closer than that. In fact, the last game, the 5th game, I really thought they were going to win, and it looked like they were going to win until Wild Turtle went nuts and got a quadra kill. And then that was just boom, end of game. But up to that point, it looked like they were going to pull it out.
Sure, and that's the problem is though is that for TSM, that's them being on point. Like they can contend with Cloud9, and Cloud9 is a really solid team. And Cloud9 did make some pretty big mistakes, but TSM was able to weather them. and go through it and actually pull out a win.
Was that the quadra kill or in like the second game, or was this in game number 5?
There was a quadra kill in 4 and 5. He pulled out
game number.
It was a game-ending quadra.
In game number 5, I recall Cloud9 having a lead for a majority of the game and making some, like, the one thing about Cloud9 is you're always like, well, Cloud9 is very consistent and very active in their shot calling, and that is the one thing that they normally always have on point. But they made this weird Baron dance call where they didn't really gain anything from it, and they pretty much gave TSM like an equalizing goal chance or like an equalizing lead in the game. It's been like a week since I've watched it. I can't remember. I don't exactly know what TSM got from it, but Cloud9, it looked like they kept trying to bait Baron, and TSM just never bit. And that was the one thing, the one little misstep that I saw Cloud9 do, which is what let TSM have them win game number 5.
Did you guys see the conspiracy thing on Reddit about Game 5 and the end of it?
No.
There was a in that big team fight when Wild Turtle did pull off the quadra kill.
Yep.
Somebody pulled up a video and there was big team fight bottom side towards red buff.
Yep.
Happens in the jungle.
Oh, by the Wraith Brush there.
Yeah. There's a melee minion that walks in on TSM's side that follows them because of warding, and blocks one of Sneaky's missiles that was going to be a big one, and they actually looked at the damage, and it probably would have killed Wild Turtle, and actually probably ended the game for C9 if it hadn't been blocked by this minion that walked in.
Wow.
And it was like, if you watch it, I mean, it's hilarious to think about that might have been one thing that swings this entire series.
There was also the fact that two seconds after that, Wild Turtle pops heal. So I don't think it would have killed it, but it would have been hilarious if that was the big deciding factor.
I know. I just really want to like imagine like two parallel universes that completely changes a little bit about Worlds, but
I think it changes a lot. I think you got TSM who's like, well, we got one thing, but like, man, that really sucked. So, and then you get fucking down to the dumps Dyrus. And I think that I would expect them to fall apart in Worlds. But I think, to me, right now, the thing that's most exciting is what's TSM's win condition for Worlds. Do they think they can go all the way, and is that what they're going to hold themselves to and emotionally invest themselves in? Or do they look at it like, hey, we conquered a major hurdle of ours. We beat a team we weren't able to beat in the finals before. We took the finals championship. We have a solid team. This has come together really at the last second here in the grand scheme of things. Let's go to Worlds, see what we can do, but let's really be focusing on next split and figuring out how we can continue to make this work.
I sure as hell hope not, because right now they've dodged a huge bullet. The biggest team that they have to worry about in the group stage right now is potentially going up against Samsung White.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, the Chinese teams, we already discussed a little bit earlier in the podcast how they're still strong, but they're not necessarily as unbeatable or as dominant as like OMG was at last Worlds. At least they're not looking like it. Sure. So you also have to maybe worry about Fnatic. You have to maybe worry about Starhorn Royal Club, and maybe worry about Samsung White. The rest of the teams that they could potentially go against are like the second and third place European teams, the GPL teams, which everybody kind of considers not as strong unless you're me, because I really like Westor. But aside from, and Wins is a really cool jungler. But like most of the other teams that they have to really worry about, I think that they're going to be able to tussle with, and it really just comes down to their preparation. So they dodged a huge bullet. Whereas now Cloud9 could potentially not make the bracket stage because they get put into a group with Samsung Blue, OMG, one of the GPL teams, and Fnatic. Like, that could happen to them.
That can't happen.
Yeah, it
That'd be way too many. They wouldn't get a pool 3 team then.
The pool 3 team, okay, SK, and a GPL team. Or not GPL
that's
team,
it.
Wildcard team.
That can work. That can work. But I mean, what the big thing is, TSM dodges Alliance, Edward Gaming, or Samsung Blue, and Cloud9 has a 2/3 chance of playing either EDG or Samsung Blue. So that's rough. Just having that one team in addition to your group, you're like, well, I don't think we're finishing above them. So we'll see. I'm really excited for the draw tomorrow. I know that's not really a hugely like heart pumping thing, but just seeing how that all shakes out is really, really interesting.
Well, it is to me because at least it starts out. Well, it's not only that, but it also starts out the Challenger Series, which is playing next week. But before we get into that, I want to take a quick look at the world stage and what we have right now. We've kind of already covered the teams that are going to have the roughest times. I mean, it's really, it's seeing how the top teams play in and what pool stages or what pools are going to be put into, or groups rather. But run me through how the group stage works.
You mean it's just okay? It's 4 groups of 4.
Yep.
And what you have is you have those 3 pools of teams.
Yep.
You have the pool 1 teams: Alliance, Edward Gaming, Samsung Blue, and TSM. So the top teams from each region, each major region, because Southeast Asia isn't being considered one this year.
Womp womp.
And then you got pool 2, which is mostly second place, third place teams from it's third place teams from Korea and China, second place from pretty much everywhere else, and TPA, the winners of Southeast Asia. Pool 3 has the wildcard teams and LMQ and SK. And so each pool will grab 1 team from Pool 1, 2 from Pool 2, and 1 from Pool 3. So it tries to balance out strength. And the only other caveat is that you cannot have 2 teams from a region in the same pool. So Korea will be split up into 3 different pools. You can't have blue and white playing each other until bracket stage. And yeah, it's gonna be a mix and match of a bunch of different regions. You don't end up with the same situation like last year where Cloud9 got 1 match in Worlds, and it was against Fnatic. So you didn't get to see that hyped Cloud9 versus Asia somewhere match.
Now, what are the formats of these games?
It's double round robin. So it's just like we've been having essentially in LCS. You'll have 1 game on blue and red side against each team. Top 2 advance to the bracket stage, and then it's just... I think it's best of 5 single elimination.
All right, and then so it's the top 2 from each bracket. Those are from each group move into the brackets. So
it'll be 8 teams
to see. So finals bracket stage is going to have a quarterfinals, semifinals, and then of course the finals. All of this is going to be playing over the next couple of months. Next episode, we're going to have a ton of hype to talk about because we're going to know which teams are in which pools, and we'll be able to make our predictions from there for Worlds. Many a League of Legends champion skins will be traded, I'm sure, in bets. Prepare your wallets. It's exciting times, and almost even more exciting is the potential for me to call my first Riot conspiracy theory.
Oh boy, yeah.
I'm pretty excited about this. So last week, to bring actually even Tom up today, because Tom, you weren't here. It was just the 3 of us.
I was not here last week.
Where's the segue? That was the worst segue. That wasn't even a segue.
Listen,
you just walked on into it. I'm okay with that, actually.
We're moving things along here, sir. We're cleaning them up.
Brute forcing the segue inhibitor on that one.
So we last week we ended up talking about the expansion tournament, and for those of you who didn't catch last week and haven't heard of this otherwise, the expansion tournament is set to add 2 more teams to each region. There's going to be an additional, and each region is North American and European, of course. What will essentially happen is the Challenger promotional tournament's going to play out like it will, and then the teams who are left from the bloody aftermath of that will be entered into this expansion tournament along with some ladder teams, and we'll get 2 more. So basically, this is making the whole, to me, this makes the whole Challenger series, this split, pointless, because it'll be very interesting.
Well,
I don't agree
the last November 5th, that was put on the bottom of the post.
Okay.
That the ladder locks November 5th, so the Challenger teams have to grind until November 5th, and it's not like all those teams get put in the tournament. It's like they cut down and cut down and cut down.
Sure. But either way, we're going to be having pretty experienced teams on the stage, at least, fighting some non-experienced teams. I'll be surprised. I'll be very excited to see ladder teams come up and actually make some pretty decent moves. That would be great to see some fresh blood in here. But what kind of the discussion went to for me is, hey, LMQ worked. Like, it went in, they shaked some feathers in the North American scene. We've been bringing in Korean players to certain teams. Maybe this whole interregional mix is something that's good for the sport. And then there was some speculation on it. I call it a conspiracy theory. Riot makes this expansion so that they can let more people in. And then they go ahead and put out a big old statement pretty much saying, yeah, we're going to let people in. And for those of you who aren't up to date with this issue, if you want to call it an issue, so Riot basically came out and put some parameters around the expansion tournament and exactly how teams can come into the new region, into North America, into Europe. And I'm going to read these off because I want to set the stage for conversation here. So I'm going to read the TLDR. So a new global interregional movement policy will be introduced next week that has been independently adopted and coordinated between the major regional professional and semi-professional leagues. That's your European LCS, OGN, etc. For North America and Europe, the policy will be enforced through a new regional residency requirement. It will apply to the expansion tournament and to all future events. So, teams currently, fine. New teams coming in, you're on this. The new NA and EU residency requirements will require teams to have a minimum of 3 of their starting players in any given game meet the new NA and EU residency requirements. The teams will retain the ability to field up to 2 non-exempt, non-residential players on their starting roster. LCS and Summer Challenger teams will not be required to change their rosters. So again, just reiterating the point that the people, namely LMQ, and any team members who've come over from different regions, they're not really affected. Exactly. Yeah, aren't really affected by all of this. So to me, this pretty much says, yes, if you're a team from someplace else, you can come here and join our league. We accept that. Here's the parameters that make it legal. The question...
Wait.
I would say it says the opposite.
Yeah.
It's saying, hey, you can't come here unless you have residents on your team.
You have to have a base of people.
What is a resident?
We're trying to figure out exactly how that works, but it was pretty much the link you sent us, the one you had us look up right now, is talking about how it would not allow teams like I think it's a bunch of CJ Frost members. We got Mad Life, Shy, and Ryu. We're talking about possibly having a team come to NA for the expansion tournament. Same thing with Samsung having white and blue already. We're looking to make a team called Samsung Red, possibly to come to Europe. And I think that was kind of a counter to that. I think they were saying, no, we're not going to allow teams to just come over from different regions. I think resident is pretty much somebody who's not needing a visa to be around. I don't know that that's necessarily true. So please don't call me out on that.
Sure.
But
I think that's the big question we have to find out the answer to. And obviously
it's
can't.
Likely there will be some sort of residency requirement to officially define what that is. My guess is it'll be at least 6 months, possibly a year.
Well, and here's how I draw all of this together. So for this upcoming expansion tournament, no, not going to happen. But they did mention circuit points as something that they're thinking about doing in the future. The way I see this, the way I see all these little strings coming together, you bring out you roll out the expansion this year, you bring in 10 teams to the LCS, you keep the format the same, you define the parameters that legally allow teams to move in by defining what a residency is, allowing the teams who are going to choose to move into the North American and European LCS, give them the parameters in which they need to meet. Then next year, at the end, you have all of the teams, they have residency figured out, however that ends up figuring out. You announce that you're going to be rolling out circuit points in the following splits, and you let your foreign teams come in and be a part of the North American and European LCS.
What's the conspiracy side of it?
I think that's what all of this is put together as. I think this is orchestrated. I don't think Riot's trying to shut this out. I don't think Riot's trying to stop this. And the conspiracy about all of this is probably there are going to be a lot of players out there, or not players rather, fans out there who got really pissed about Riot shutting down all of the tournaments that came through from people like MLG and the rest by basically setting up their own little fort and saying, here's where we all live and we're going to play by our rules. And now they're kind of giving and supporting, more international teams moving in, basically letting more people into their fort, but it's still their fort.
Let's be fair. As the former MLG employee, MLG pretty much said, we're going to do Dota. And Riot said, all right. And then MLG was like, we're not going to do League of Legends. All right. And then I was on the streets of New York with a sign and a tin can.
See, I just don't get it. I mean, right now, it seems like that can happen. You have LMQs coming in. So they're not making it easier. They're, in fact, making it harder.
First of all, there's... Okay,
so in other words, they're not saying, no, it's never going to happen where you can't... Like, there's going to be just permanent static regions, and no one is going to move in between. They obviously can't stop that. But they're setting up, like, significant restrictions, it would seem to me. And if they use the definition of legal residency, one of our people was pointing it out in the chat room, that could mean as much as 5 years living in the area if you're talking about America.
Legal's not used in the...
Well,
in the
they haven't
article.
released what it means.
Right.
Okay, so
here's what it's not going to be. You can fly over on a plane and immediately do it. So already it's more difficult than it is right now.
I don't know. I'm looking at another article right now.
Yeah.
And I think they're saying you can have those. You're saying 3 out of 5 have to meet residency requirements, and this is true for the exemption for the expansion tournament. So they can't come over for that. I think they're saying that teams can't start adding more and more people. Like let's say TSM actually probably couldn't add another international player because they already have 2 that are, I believe, on visas, because Amazing and Less Boys should be if they're over here.
Yeah.
Oh, and Bjergsen's, yeah. So okay, they're already okay, but they can't add more, at least to their starting lineup, is what I understand. They still need to release more info about it, and I know that's going to come in the next week or so. Yeah,
it's coming this week. It says here that the full specifications on the residency requirement will be released next week, but that it's going to emphasize having a sustained and prolonged residence in a region before participating in its league.
Yeah, so I'm okay with that. I don't really know how it's going to affect too many things. But I think they're just trying not to dilute. Dilute's not the right word, but just have people be able to just come over and join an easier region, and I'm pretty okay with that. I like having people be able to qualify and make it to Worlds just without having, let's say, like 2 Korean teams just suddenly jump in an expansion tournament and just crush everyone. I don't want to see that in an A.
Well, I think that for Riot, from a business perspective, is the best thing that can happen for them, because they want not the whole Koreans coming in and crushing it. It's the opposite. Bringing these other teams in, diversifying the pool, increasing the skill level of those regions is going to make Worlds more competitive for their home regions. Where I would actually love to see what the player base breakdown is, because I can see a lot of North American fans, people who are like, yeah, CLG all year, TSM, Cloud9, go, 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 getting really discouraged when it comes to Worlds, because you see your favorite teams that you've been cheering for all year get utterly shut down in Worlds. That's what the perspective is. That's what the general idea seems to be in some cases. But I
could speak to that, because
sure,
when I first got into LCS before joining the podcast, that was not really my experience, but I know what you're talking about. I was pumped for Cloud9. I was pumped for TSM. I was pumped for Fnatic. It's like, oh, let's get in there and see what these guys can do. And you see these other teams from the other regions, and you don't necessarily... I knew like a few people, like I had heard of Faker, for instance. But I hadn't really seen any of their games. I had no emotional connection with those teams. But when you're cheering for your favorites, all of a sudden the other team is the people you root against, because it's just the way it is.
Absolutely.
But you also, because you want to like... When you're following a tournament like this and your team gets knocked out, assuming you like the game generally, you will always pick another team. Like, okay, well, my team's out. But, this team's going to go all the way, and then you'll follow that team. So after the American teams got popped out, I started following Fnatic. And when Fnatic got popped out, I was like, okay, well, I guess I got to look around at some of these international teams. It encouraged me to look at their games, find out more about their players. And I was like, oh, all right, I can get behind Royal Club maybe. And I started following them and so on and so forth. So as long as the tournament is compelling, yeah, it might suck to see your favorite team get completely trashed, but as long as you do a good a good job of expanding the tournament experience beyond what you know and having, say, video packages that introduce new players and new teams, especially during games where, say the North American and European teams are playing, start hyping the games from the other regions, start talking about those players, line up the matchups, bring in some of the team's narratives as sort of like previews for other games. And then, if your team does happen to get out, now you have some stories to follow. You have some people to follow. You might make a slight connection with someone out there that, maybe the team that knocked out my team, I feel bad about that, but, the team that knocked out my team, they better win the whole thing. Some people feel like that. Or you might say, I definitely don't want them to win, so I'm going to root for the other guy. Who are they? Come tell me that. As long as they do a good job with that, I don't think it's going to be a huge issue. Eventually, you're going to have some fan base that extends beyond the regions. And I think that the ecosystem online has sort of encouraged that by making LPL easier to follow and the Korean league's easier to follow. Reddit is posting results from those teams, that sort of thing. They're having some English casting of Korean games. I feel like that's where it's going anyway, so it's not the worst thing.
I just wonder, and at this point in playing devil's advocate, I think that's a really solid point you just made there, Greg, but I wonder if they're going to try to capture that magic and bring that into their own league system. Where it's like, hey, here's something we can sell. Here's names you haven't seen before. This is some crazy stuff that's going to be happening. Everything you know about the world is about to change because here are new teams, here's new people to get excited about. Here's a whole new narrative for you.
Well, as an esports fan, looking at this, the big things that kind of come to my mind have been, I've seen this happen twice in competitions in esports that I follow very closely are Magic the Gathering and StarCraft 2, obviously. And when Blizzard first introduced their WCS, they had no region locking. And what wound up happening was Korean players that could not make it in Korea went to the WCSNA and the WCS EU and dominated, to the point where Blizzard recently is going to be putting a region locking system in place as well. But when you look at the way that StarCraft has developed, Brood War had a very, very long history. And in that history, Korea, from 2001, when Gur stopped playing, onward, Korea was the dominant place and the mecca of StarCraft and the mecca of esports. And they dominated StarCraft Brood War. When StarCraft 2 came out, it continued to do that because there's a lush history and infrastructure set up in Korea, whereas NA was slowly adapting and making their own gaming houses, and teams are getting more money and sponsorships to help players out more and sending them abroad and et cetera, et cetera. So the one thing that the no region locked helped with was Korean players, Chinese players, Southeast Asian players moved all around the world, played against these other players, and slowly but surely, they were dominating European players and dominating NA players, and the certain regions and certain players got stronger. And now you have in NA, 15 of the 16 people who qualified for WCS were Korean. 7 of them were Korean in Europe. And looking at the way that the StarCraft 2 scene is going right now, you have people like TLO and Bunny and Mana and Scarlet and which we got old Ghosty Terran. I can't remember his name. He changes it all the time. I think he's still Phoenix or something like that now. But you have these players that have gotten stronger and these organizations that have gotten stronger. Whereas now that there's going to be Blizzard's implementing a region lock system, some of those Korean players have to go back to Korea and have to play in the Korean WCS. And these other, like, originally the StarCraft fans thought that no region lock was the stupidest idea ever, and everybody hated it. And now that they're thinking about doing it, people think it's the stupidest idea ever, and everybody hates it. It sounds like Reddit or something. But that showed the signs of, okay, the Koreans were extremely dominant. Let's switch focus to something a little bit different. You can compare this to Dota 2 or even Magic the Gathering. Magic the Gathering has a very long competitive history of over 15 to 20 years. And for a large majority of the time, the Japanese were dominant at Magic. They came out of Japan with these weird decks. Nobody knew how to play against them. They were winning pro tours and international competitions like Grand Prix left and right. And it was like a real struggle for everybody to compete against them. Over the years, the North American and European regions got stronger and stronger and stronger, whereas the last Pro Tour was a all North America. I'm sorry, it was all but one player were from North America and Europe, to the point where everybody had evolved. Obviously, the game changes in Magic maybe a little bit more than some of the RTS games, because there's new sets every 3 months in different formats, et cetera, et cetera. But over the course of many years, the regions as a whole got so strong that Japan is no longer as dominant. They're still really good, but they're not nearly as dominant. Same thing in Dota. China has been dominant, but recently all the NA teams are winning. So you could look at it from this history saying, is region locking good? Is region locking bad? We don't know. In League of Legends specifically, there's been a handful of IEMs, an All-Star game, and a Worlds that Korea has won. Popular opinion is that Korea is the best region out there. Are they the best region? Probably, but we're going to have to find out at Worlds.
Yeah, and that's what Worlds is for. When you say it's better or worse, you have to define your goal here. And I think what Riot is doing is something very smart. They're not basing this estimation on, we need to make, quote, better players, end quote, whatever the hell that means. Like better mechanically sound players. They're giving regions identities, which is not so much for the player's benefit as it is for the audience's benefit. It's not fun to watch North American LCS if you know that it's a dumping ground for the C-level Korean players. That's not fun for anyone to watch. It might theoretically make teams stronger, and you might have, quote, better tournaments at a high level of play. But the casual audience doesn't care about that, and even the semi-non-casual audience doesn't care for that. I wouldn't care about that.
Well, I mean,
it's not me playing. You know, I'm watching. I want entertaining games with players that I care about and teams that I recognize.
Time will tell. Time will certainly tell, and we're gonna have to wrap up this conversation because I just gotta say
one quick thing.
League of Legends soon.
I gotta say one quick thing.
You have 30 seconds.
I'm not too worried about having other players from regions come over because the experiment happened in Brazil this year, and no Koreans from Brazil made it to Worlds.
Okay. So time will tell. We'll know more next week when more information comes out. I'm sure this is something that we're going to not only be discussing as more information comes out, but as the seasons, the next splits evolve. This is going to always be on top of mind because we have the lovely ability of covering that throughout all of those splits. So only for the sake of time, we will move on from this discussion for now and pick it up at a later date. Let's just take a really quick run through the challenger scene coming up, the games coming up this week, and take a look at this, see really what's going to be happening. That was the worst segue ever.
You tried.
That was a segue.
I really did.
That's a segue with no batteries and no wheels.
Yeah, that's a segue that takes its CEO off a cliff and crashes.
So the CEO of Segway.
I mean,
yes. So we have Copenhagen Wolves up against H2 Gaming, CLG on Curse Academy. That's day 1. Day 2, Gambit on SK Prime. EG on Team Coast. That's going to be a fun one for me. Millennium, and the last day is Millennium Unicorns of Love and Complexity, Team 8. Really quick predictions. Let's see. Mitch, Copenhagen Wolves or H2 Gaming?
I guess I think Wolves will still be fine.
They got
I don't know.
Airwax back.
Huh?
They got Airwax back.
Yeah, and that'll be perfect. I don't know. I haven't really thought about Challenger for a little bit because of how much we've been covering with LCS and Worlds, and it's kind of a sideshow. But it's awesome that we have it going on. I think Wolves will stay in. I really want to see Unicorns of Love win, so I'm going to root for them. I want to see Vizicachi. Just people saying that name all the time in in the LCS.
That's why I miss Little Balls.
Yeah.
So, Greg, Double Lift or Saint Vicious?
Oh wow. Pick a winner, but of the two, believe it or not, I would have to say Saint Vicious. I really dislike
You're
Double Lift.
fired.
Wait.
I have such a visceral dislike for him. I am so sorry to all Double Lift fans, but I can't stand him.
Hey Tom,
Yeah.
do you know who Miracle and Ringer are? I don't know the two Koreans that Coast added because that's a big deal, guys.
The
that
only-
Coast added 2 Koreans this week.
So there's two things I've heard. One has been from Korean players that say that they are not good, and two is from people close to CLG that said they shit stomp CLG. So that you judge them as you will.
Okay. All right. I don't know. I want Probably to stay in. So
Well,
That's-
they're playing EG. They're not playing Complexity.
oh, that's right. I'm sorry.
Right.
You were correct.
So the biggest thing with that one is Coast changed their members like a week and a half before, or like before the actual tournament comes in. So first off, they don't speak great English. Second off, they haven't practiced together. Third off, they're going up against EG, who looked really good at the end of the split. And if they played like that the most of the split, they wouldn't be in that position. So I highly doubt Coast gets in. I highly doubt.
Well, it
like
worked for-
90-10 EG.
It worked for TSM. Gambit versus SK. Tom.
Gambit versus SK Prime. Gambit has become the sanctuary for challenger players that have a chance to play for an LCS team before they get relegated.
We have to work on our fast answers.
I really don't want Diamond. I really don't want Diamond to get relegated, but
Relegated
Prime is really
brings back
good.
into the expansion tournament. Complexity versus Teammate Mitch.
I'll go with that.
Team 8, California Trolls. I hope he stays. I know he wants to go to pharmaceutical school, but I like Team 8.
All right. Well, we have some more news to cover, but unfortunately, we are out of time. We have to get ready to go shit stomp the T-Force proper in LCS.
I
Wrecker
just
will
got
be
the game
joining
invite.
us.
Game invite just happened.
Wrecker will be
Oh,
joining
yeah.
us live. So have fun, guys, and catch you in the Latersville.
That means, guys, don't turn off the stream because we're going to be playing right here in just a couple
Jesus
minutes.
Christ, am I going to be streaming that?
I have no
No,
idea.
I think Badger is, but I don't know how that's
fantastic.
working.
Awesome.
'cause-
All right, we stopping
'cause
there?
Spectate-